Good day, everyone. Welcome to our webinar session. This webinar is brought to you by IES Research, a team that provides research publication with an engaging voice through the adaptation of the IES storyboard of Big Why, What. We design visuals and animations to support your research findings, maximize the understanding of the discoveries, and share your story globally to improve research visibility and increase scholarly engagement. My name is Iris Xu, and I'm your host today. Today, we're happy to have Yuvarani Nair Sukumaram, Research Curation Consultant at IES Research, to talk about the topic, Read the Full Text Structurally. Yuva has extensive experience in transforming complicated research papers into plain language summary, which requires her to digest research papers from different disciplines, get the essence of it, and summarize it in simple language. Her sharing today will be based on her own experiences. The sharing will be about 15 minutes, and then we have 15 minutes for questions and answers. You're welcome to ask questions during the sharing. Simply type your question into the chat box at the toolbar at the bottom of the meeting screen. We will collect those questions and answers then at the Q&A session later. Now, without further ado, let me pass the ground to Yuva to share the screen and start our session today.
Thank you, Iris. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As mentioned by Iris, I'm Yuvarani Nair Sukumaran from IES Research. I'm a research curation consultant currently based in Malaysia. I work a lot with scientific manuscripts, and I specialize in giving scientific discoveries a voice through plain language summaries and impact stories. Just to add on a little bit on my background, I majored in biochemistry and started off my career as a research assistant at University Malaya Medical Center. Apart from assisting in drug discovery research projects and conducting clinical observations, a large portion of my time was dedicated to literature survey. A lot of reading time was needed for me to equip myself with sufficient knowledge. Then, I pursued a career in teaching. Reading again played an essential role as the knowledge I imparted needed to be current and proven. Having experienced and witnessed the struggles of coming up with an efficient reading process, as your speaker for the day, allow me to sculpt effective guidelines to approach reading, namely through a strategic and structured approach as well as with the aid of AI. Without further ado, let's look at how do we read. Generally, reading can be for three reasons. Reading for pleasure, mostly as a hobby or a pastime. This is where we read novels or fictions. Some read for fluency, to work on their language proficiency. And lastly, reading for knowledge, basically to educate the reader on academic content or trending discoveries, which, as researchers, we are no strangers to. However, reading a scientific manuscript or a research paper is neither entertaining nor it is easily comprehensible. As a beginner or a young researcher, it is common to adapt a freestyle reading approach. Word-to-word reading was my very first experience of reading a research paper. I remember I read from the first word of the title to the very last word of the article. It was indeed a nightmare. Freestyle reading to some can also mean selective reading of random portions of the paper. This approach, without a structure, is not much of a use either. Instead, it would lead to more confusion and misinterpretations, sometimes even leading to reading the entire paper again and again just because of the fear that you might lose out on some points. Therefore, a defined structure is crucial, especially for non-native English speakers attempting to read English manuscripts. Structured reading. According to a 2002 framework suggested by RAND Reading Study Group, comprehension or reading for understanding is a process of simultaneously extracting and constructing meaning of the written word. There are three dimensions to this process: the text, the context, and the reader. Before we dive into structuring the text and extracting the context, I would like to make a note stating that a reader's background, his or her proficiency in English, and the subject matter expertise are difficult to address with the following method. It would require extra effort from the reader to seek definitions of the words or jargons they are not familiar with. Moving on, we shall see how we can approach the text and the context of a primary research article. A study by a researcher from the University of Waterloo suggested to organize your reading flow into 3 passes. During the first pass, you could skim through the article to get a general idea of the paper. This process would roughly take 5 to 10 minutes. And it is not a one-time effort, but requires at least 3 to 5 times of skimming. What you should look out for while you are skimming is the title, the plain language summary if available, the abstract, and the introduction, particularly to identify the thesis statement. Now that you have identified the problems this research seeks to solve, it is time for you to dig up the key points. The what or the novelty, as well as the originality of the research to comprehend the entire flow and outcome of the research. During this second pass, you should start paying attention to the tables and figures, the methodology, discussion, and conclusion. Before you proceed any further, it would be useful to put these details you have extracted into an easily accessible form for future reference or to be used to revisit this paper for in-depth interpretation. Restructuring your notes into a storyboard allows you to revisit the text without spending more time on rereads of the entire article. Since the IES storyboard applies the concept of critical thinking in its framework, by utilizing it, you can then construct meaningful interpretation out of the findings without much hassle, which aligns perfectly with the third pass's purpose: interpret the details critically to understand the paper in depth. I would also like to stress that there are instances where you would still need to refer to the original text for details. But with the storyboard at hand, the comprehension process would be much smoother. Of course, some of you might wonder if this process is actually more tedious than just reading the paper multiple times. Honestly, it might start off as a time-consuming process, but with practice, it eventually trains your mind to have the skills to read and understand articles faster and more efficiently. With that being said, I consider myself lucky to be living in an era of never-ending technological advancement. In today's world, technology plays a crucial role in almost every part of our lives. AI is proving its usage and dominance through every inch of it. My reading experience has lately been influenced, better still, improved with the assistance of an AI tool known as Scala See. Technically, Scala See is an AI-assisted online summarizing tool that minimizes time and effort spent on reading and extracting key points from research papers. Using Scala See, I was able to gather background reading suggestions, scout for important points, quickly read through reference summary, easily locate cited sources, and extract figures and tables without much hassle. At the beginning, like any researcher would, I questioned its functionality and compared it with the reading methods I've been employing all this while. The outcome of this comparison is something I'd like to share with all of you. When I attempted to superimpose the three-pass approach with Scala See, the amount of effort I spent extracting the purpose and the key points, which are the first and the second pass, was actually reduced by the Scala See highlights. The Scala See highlights helped me to summarize the entire article and churn out 5 to 6 key research points based on the language pattern analysis. This automated key point capture managed to reduce the number of times a reader would need to skim through the paper prior to understanding the content. In my experience, from needing to go through the paper 3 to 5 times, now I'm just looking at it at less than 3 times to comprehend the content. That is also depending again on the technicality of the paper. Moreover, due to its algorithms, as long as the primary research articles are written in standard forms, Scala See would be able to guarantee consistency in key research point recognition. And for the beginners, or for those who are struggling to put details into perspective, I believe Scala See highlights would serve as a great assistant. Let's just assume you feel that Scala See highlights might only be giving you a surface picture of the whole paper, and you would like to dig deeper to interpret the findings and reflect on the paper. Scala See summary would provide you exactly that. Different from the highlights, Scala See summary sums up each section of the paper into 2 to 3 sentences respectively. Furthermore, if you wish to explore sections that interest you, Scala See could aid in condensing important points of each section, even highlighting it in various colors to emphasize its significance. Improves your content extraction process with consistency as well as precision. Next, allow me to bring you back to the 3 dimensions framed by the RAND Reading Study Group. What a manual approach to structuring reading couldn't address, which is the reader's background, can now be addressed with the aid of AI. Being a non-native English speaker myself, I understand the challenge of constantly needing to refer to the dictionary. This tedious back and forth search can sometimes render your reading and comprehension process futile. With the reader's best interest in mind, Scala See as an AI-assisted tool has managed to reduce the never-ending browsing for definition process to just 1 click. The keywords or jargons identified throughout the summary, which with just 1 click would direct you to Wikipedia to provide you basic definitions and elaborations to those words, thus making the comprehension process much more manageable for you. In a nutshell, when reading a research paper, the process of comprehension is suggested to be more effective and efficient with a structure. From the 2 reading styles introduced, structured reading approach requires manual conceptualization, which over time enhances the reader's key point extraction skills as well as critical thinking skills. On the other hand, an AI-assisted reading approach benefits its readers with its reduced and structured extraction process that is automated, which helps those struggling with such skills to reach their endpoint easily. By providing linkage to descriptions of keywords or jargons, readers who are non-native English speakers or non-field experts will still be able to grasp the gist of the paper. Also, I would like to emphasize that AI is here to assist the process and not entirely replace manual reading. Once again, to sum up today's sharing, I remind all of you to read and to understand a research paper, it is best for you to approach it strategically. And that's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Yuva, for the sharing. Now we have the Q&A session opened, and I already see some chattings in the chat box. And you're also welcome to type in the question in the Q&A bar, which is also in the middle of your Zoom toolbar. So let me see if we have any questions. And I think that some of the questions are answered in the chat box, but you're still welcome to type them in so we can monitor if there are any new questions. Okay. So now we have one question. How, Yuva, please trying to answer that. So how to extract out the key points without plagiarize the contents of the paper?
Okay. If you are using manual extraction method, so what happens is that when you're extracting the process, what you are doing is you're actually trying to take note of whichever points that are relevant to you. Hence, you put it into a format where you can revisit this. If you would like to write those contents or include those contents in your paper, then what you should do is that you should actually try to rephrase it or paraphrase it based on how you would like to structure. So the method that I'm sharing with you today here is not so much on you just extract and you can put it into your paper, but it's more of how could you approach reading in a strategic manner. So if you are using Scala See, what it helps you to do is that it extracts the points or directs you towards the key points, which you would be able to do, but you would actually spend more time. So Scala See helps you to reduce the time spent. So, but it doesn't change or it doesn't rephrase it for you. So depending on which are the useful or meaningful key points that you would like to include, you would need to go and interpret it as well as include it into your paper. You have to rephrase it without plagiarizing the content, or you could actually cite the paper appropriately. Yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Yuva. Another question is that, is there any structure recommended for storing the information for future references?
Okay, so like what I've suggested earlier, based on my own experience, before I was, when I started off as a researcher, what I did was that it was a method that was trained or taught to me when I just started going into the research field, where you have to come up with your own bibliography, in the sense that when you read a paper, you should write down the gist of the paper and store it so that you could refer back to it in future. So here we suggested few methods for you. So one of it was using the storyboard. So if you look at the IES storyboard, it uses a critical thinking approach. So you have the big why, which is actually the larger problem that you would like to solve, and then you have the why, which is what you are trying to solve immediately, and then you have the what. So when you the what is actually the novelty and the originality, meaning what the solution is, or the paper, what is it, what solution is the paper suggesting. So when you can extract all these points and put it into that format, and you can file it, it could be a written format, or it could also be something which you store it in a soft copy. So in future, if you want to refer, you could always go back to that. And in case you would need to dig deep and interpret the paper even further, then you could spend some time on the discussions and the results to, to understand, or if, let's just say, if you want to recreate the research, then what you should do is that you should also go through the methods. But the methods that are being suggested here is to reduce the time, as well as the number of time that you refer back to the original paper and to read it all over again. Because I'm not suggesting that we are going to replace reading entirely. No, you still would need to read the entire paper, but the amount of effort that you spend to reread the paper would be reduced if you could actually extract all of this and structure it. And if, let's just say, you're using Scala See for that matter. So if Scala See has got its own library where all the extracted points could be stored there. So all you need to do is that you just need to go, and once you have uploaded the paper, then you just need to click on your library, click on the paper in the library, and then the extracted notes would be there.
Also, we do have a few questions regarding Scala See, whether it is a free open source software to use, or what is the percentage of text extracted from the original manuscript by Scala See? Yuva, can you help?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Scala See, there are actually two versions. For those of you who are interested and who have not heard or used Scala See before, you can actually use the browser extension. I think it's supported. It supports Chrome browsers, so you can use that. That's actually a free version. So the free browser extension sort of gives you the idea of how it works, and you can upload your papers there, the papers that you would like to read there, and it would capture the points, the Scala See summary, the Scala See highlights, and even the highlighted points in each section. But the downside of it is that this free version, you cannot store it in the library. So if you would like to store and you would like to keep a library, or you would like to store all the extracted points, then it would be suggested if you use the paid version. So for those of you who are still wondering if this was a sales pitch, it's really not a sales pitch. It's just us trying to strategize or introduce methods for you to, to ease researchers' literature survey time. And what is the percentage of the text extracted? Well, it depends on the paper, the way the paper was written. Depending on how the original manuscript was written, and because Scala See uses algorithms and also language pattern recognition, so as long as it could trace crucial points, it would actually extract. But if you would like me to give you a specific figure for it, I might not be able to, but I would be happy to get back to you on that.
Okay, so another question is, what is the most logical or effective process in reading a paper for the beginner, for example, for university students?
Okay. Usually what I've seen my students doing, or even from my own experience, what we do is that we usually look at the title, the abstract, we look at the introduction, and then we jump straight to the conclusion. Okay, so even that could be very challenging, especially for the non-native English speakers, because sometimes the titles could be too technical, or the words used could be very much new to us. So that would actually disturb or render our disrupt our process of selection or even understanding the paper. So the most effective process, I would say, hands-on is always better for you to actually learn or to improve your skills. To improve your vocab as well as your skills eventually through reading. That would also be if you could extract points, means if you know where to look at, where do you want to get those points. So if you look at, usually people assume that looking at the abstract could actually help you, but again, the language used sometimes is not that easy for a lot of us. So I would suggest approach reading through a critical thinking point of view, meaning have some questions that you would like to answer. So of course, in school, we have been taught of the W's and the H questions, right? So you could use that method, or if you want to get a quick gist, so you just try to figure out what is the problem that the paper is going to solve, and what is the suggested solution. And if it fits your research, or it fits what you're looking for, then you can further analyze the paper. There's actually no one answer to fit all, but I would say practice makes perfect. So you need to spend some time to learn how to identify which positions you can actually find the paper. Because most primary research articles are written in a standard form. So it's quite easy to recognize. It's just that we might find it hard because of, mainly because of the language.
So is this method also apply for theoretical papers?
Yeah, there's no, like I said earlier, as long as the paper is written in a primary, in the format, in a standard format of the primary research article, so you would be able to extract the points. And also, I would like to emphasize again that it's the questions that you want to answer. So the approaches that we are discussing here right now is more on identifying the questions that you would like to answer when you want to read a paper, and then knowing where to look for the answer in the paper. Regardless of the discipline, the paper could actually still be, any papers could, you can still extract the key points based on these questions or these approaches. And of course, if you're using AI assisted, for those of us who find it hard to actually identify these key points, AI could actually help us direct us towards those key points. And it's also good because it's very consistent. I wouldn't say it's 100% precise, but it's very consistent with the key point capturing. So that could also assist or ease your way when it comes to reading.
Due to the interest of time, I think we will probably need to close the question and answer, but I will still ask Yuva to answer the questions as much as we can. So the next question is, where to get the storyboard in Scala See? Yuva? Where to get the storyboard in Scala See? Okay. Well, when you want to superimpose the storyboard and Scala See, I would say the Scala See highlight does most of it, because the Scala See highlight captures the big why, and it also captures the why and the what. So if you want to further explore the methods, then you have to go into specific, portions of or sections where in Scala See itself, because Scala See does capture section-based summaries, as well as it highlights those key points for you. So Scala See highlights could actually give you a better understanding if you would like to look at it from the storyboard point of view. Right, the last question. How could I classify my papers library? Because sometimes I read an interesting point in the paper. After a while, I forget the place where I read the idea. So I look back forward to all paper I have read, but sometimes I cannot to find that point. Any suggestions? Okay, this is actually a very common struggle, because I remember struggling similarly, as well as even my students. I've seen them struggling in the same manner. So one way that I've thought myself, and I feel that it is quite helpful, is one is to know which are the papers that you would like to use immediately. So if you know which are the papers that you would like to use immediately, then you classify or cluster them into a folder, and you extract those points, and you have to write out a bibliography.
many times we feel that we just need to highlight those those key points, and then we just leave it there. So when you just highlight and you just leave it there, that is where you tend to have this issue where when you want to search for this particular phrase or this particular point, you tend to lose track. So if you have a bibliography, then it would be easier. So when you want to capture those, also remember to capture the keywords, not just the key points, but keywords. So what I do is that I have a few folders. So usually I name it as immediate. So immediate read means it's for immediate use. So I have all those papers that I want to immediately use it. I put it there along with the bibliography, meaning a small write-up of a short write-up of what the paper is about, which are the key points that I've highlighted in the paper. I would extract it and put it into the Word document, and then I would store it one side. And then the other folder, I would actually name it as KIV, keep in view. So those folders, again, when I have time, I usually, because we do highlight, right? So as I highlight, I would just copy and paste it in a Microsoft Word file, because again, like what we said, if you can capture the keyword and if you can capture these phrases, so when you have this extracted and written in the keywords form, later on when you want to search it, you just need to just go and type those keywords or type the sentence that sort of comes up to your mind, and it would be easier for you to track on your search bar itself, from your files. So having don't just highlight those papers, but also try to write it out or type it out, or copy paste it somewhere, so that when you want to refer, it would be much more easier for you to refer. Highlighting, it helps, but like what you have experienced all this while, highlighting alone doesn't help when you want to revisit the paper.
Thank you, Yuva. I think this is a very good sharing, and we have many interesting questions, and I think most of them are well answered, and thank you. Although we do have more questions, but unfortunately, due to the interest of time, we cannot answer them one by one. But I just want you to know that the recorded version will be sent to you all after this webinar, and you're welcome to come back and view it at any time you like. And for those questions, we will try to answer that individually, separately, offline. Now, again, thank you very much for joining in to our webinar session, and we will have more webinar sessions to come in the next few weeks, which describes how to write a good plan language summary, how to draw a graphical abstract, and how to promote your research online. So stay tuned, and you're welcome to register for all these future webinars. Thank you very much again, Yuva, for this sharing, and thank you all for joining. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.